Stop. Beloved starseed of Gaia. The Arcturian Council has been tracking this sequence for cycles, and what they have mapped is now converging. Your body is already registering the approach of something it cannot yet name. And this transmission exists because the preparation window is real, it is narrow, and it is open right now. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening to you now, why your field has shifted, and what the Arcturians already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation. The fatigue, the pressure in your skull, the sudden inability to sleep at predictable hours, the feeling that your nervous system is running a process you did not authorize. None of that is breakdown. That is your cellular layer detecting the pre-flash frequency signature the Arcturian Council has been monitoring since before you found this message. The solar flash event is not a metaphor. At the protocol level, it is a frequency burst of sufficient magnitude to force every field still anchored to the old timeline into a quantum jump. Not gradually, not gently, not on a schedule you can negotiate with. What the Arcturian Council wants you to understand right now is that the jump itself is not the danger. The danger is a body that resists the burst, a cellular layer that is braced, defended, and still running the frequency of the timeline it is about to leave. That is the point where most starseeds fail the preparation. Not because they lack awareness, but because their body was never told what was coming and was never given the chance to stop working against it. The field changed first. Your body is reading that change now, and there is still time to bring the cellular layer into alignment before the flash arrives. If you recognize what your body is already showing you, and if you stop interpreting those signs as symptoms of something wrong. You did not find this message by accident. Your field brought you here because the process has already begun. The algorithm only delivered this. It did not create the timing. Like this transmission, if you can feel that something invisible has already changed. Comment 777 if you feel your field is already being repositioned. Subscribe to Arcturian Quantum if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it. You were guided here because the signal is already active. What your body is registering right now is not new. It has been building beneath the surface of your daily life for longer than you have consciously acknowledged. The pressure, the disruption, the strange interior silence that descends without warning. These are not the beginning of something. They are the first visible layer of something that started long before this moment. Think of it as the moment a fault line becomes visible on the surface of the Earth. The ground did not fracture the moment you saw the crack. The fracture had been advancing through the deep structure for a long time before it finally broke through into view. What you are seeing now, what you are feeling now, is the surface expression of a shift that has been running through your field architecture at a depth your daily awareness was never designed to monitor. The Arcturian Council does not observe human fields at the surface level. They track the deeper architecture, the frequency lines, the energetic blueprints, the invisible scaffolding that holds a life in a particular shape. And what they have been tracking in fields like yours is a pattern that repeats across every major correction event in recorded Arcturian history. A field begins to lose compatibility with its current timeline before the individual has any conscious awareness that a change is underway. The outer life continues. The schedule continues. The habits, the relationships, The familiar interior landscape, all of it continues on the surface. But underneath, something has already shifted. The foundation of the old line has already begun to lose structural integrity. The load-bearing elements of the life you built are still standing, but the ground they were anchored into has changed its composition. And the body knows. The body always knows before the mind catches up. It has instruments the conscious mind does not have access to. It reads frequency the way a compass reads magnetic north, not through analysis, but through direct, involuntary response. This is precisely why what you are experiencing now feels so disorienting. You are not observing a change from a safe distance. You are living inside one that began without your conscious permission, in a layer of your field you were never given the coordinates to. The fatigue that arrives without adequate cause. The pressure that settles into your skull or your chest without a medical explanation that satisfies you. The sleep that no longer obeys the patterns you built around it. These are not signs of weakness or deterioration. They are signs that your cellular layer is already processing a frequency reality that your conscious mind has not yet been given language for. And that gap between what the body is already registering and what the mind can still coherently explain is exactly where the majority of starseeds in this phase begin to fracture. Not because the process is too much for them, but because they have no interpretive framework for what is happening, and so they allow fear to name it first. Fear will call this breakdown. Fear will call it illness. Fear will call it failure, instability, or the early signs of something that needs to be medicated or suppressed or managed back into normalcy. The Arcturian High Council calls it pre-convergence field response. And the difference between those two interpretations is not merely semantic. It determines everything about how you move through the next phase. One interpretation sends you searching for a way to stop what is happening. The other allows you to move with it, to stop bracing against a tide that was never going to be stopped by resistance, and to direct your energy toward alignment instead of defense. The solar flash is not approaching your external world first. It is approaching your field first. That is the sequence the Arcturian protocols have always described. The frequency burst does not arrive uniformly across all physical realities simultaneously. It moves through the energetic architecture of those who are already being prepared, like a current moving through a network of conductors that have been specifically identified for their capacity to carry it. It reaches the fields of those who have been identified, not randomly selected, but identified through resonance, before it becomes a global event. Which means that what you are feeling in your body right now is not a coincidence with the timing of this transmission. It is the evidence that your field is already inside the preparation window. You are not waiting for something to begin. You are in the middle of something that has already begun. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field stops denying what has already begun. If this transmission put language around something you have been carrying in silence, Arcturian protocol, the recalibration blueprint, was created for this exact stage. It is not another explanation. It is the guided blueprint for those whose field has already entered correction and can no longer return to the old line unchanged. It shows you how to recognize the phases, stabilize the shift, and move through the recalibration without mistaking it for collapse. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. There is a specific pattern the Arcturian High Council has identified as the first readable sign that a field has entered the preparation sequence. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with visible light or undeniable spiritual phenomena that remove all doubt and make the path forward obvious. It arrives quietly, in the margins of ordinary life, and it arrives through the disruption of what was previously reliable. Your routines begin to feel hollow. The practices you built your stability around stop delivering the same results. The morning ritual that used to settle something in you now moves through you without catching. The spiritual practice that once opened a door now stands in front of a wall. The relationships that once anchored you begin to feel like they belong to a version of you that is no longer current. Not because those people have changed, but because the frequency you are standing in no longer matches the frequency at which those connections were formed. You may find yourself sitting inside a life that looks structurally identical to the one you had 6 months ago, but that feels fundamentally foreign, as though you are visiting it rather than living in it, as though the coordinates are the same, but the territory has changed. This is not dissociation. This is not depression masquerading as spiritual experience. This is field-level incompatibility becoming conscious. Your old architecture was built to hold a specific frequency range. That frequency range was appropriate for the timeline you are on. It served you. It supported you. It was not a mistake. But when the Arcturian preparation sequence activates, your field begins to shift into a higher resonance band, and every structure that was built around the old frequency begins to lose its grip. Not because those structures were wrong, not because the people in them are wrong, but because they were calibrated for a version of you that the process is already moving beyond. The hollowness you feel is not absence. It is the energetic echo of structures that have already lost their functional alignment with what you are becoming. The scaffolding is still visible, but the building it was holding has already begun to move. The second sign is more disorienting, and it is the one that most often causes starseeds in this phase to misinterpret the entire process as personal failure. This is the sign of inner fragmentation. The feeling that your thoughts are no longer linear, your focus is no longer reliable, and your sense of self is no longer a stable reference point. You may find that you begin sentences internally and cannot locate the end of them. That you sit down to make a decision and discover that the internal compass you have always navigated by has gone quiet or is giving you contradictory readings. That you make choices and immediately feel uncertain whether those decisions came from you or from something that no longer reflects your current reality. That the interior narrative you have relied on to orient yourself in the world, the story of who you are, what you value, what direction you are moving in, has become inconsistent, interrupted, or strangely silent in a way that feels less like peace and more like signal loss. The Arcturian High Council identifies this as signal interference. When a field is being repositioned, the old frequency patterns that maintained your habitual mental architecture are disrupted. The neural grooves, the familiar pathways of thought and self-concept and meaning-making that you have been traveling for years, are being overwritten, not destroyed. Overwritten. This distinction matters. Destruction would mean the loss of those capacities permanently. Overwriting means those pathways are being replaced with patterns that carry more structural complexity, more dimensional reach, more capacity to hold the frequency that is incoming. But during the overwriting process, there is a period of apparent dysfunction. The old pattern is losing coherence. The new pattern has not yet stabilized. And in between, the mind experiences what feels like disorder, but is actually the noise produced by two frequency layers running simultaneously. The old life trying to maintain its signal, the new field asserting its structure, and your consciousness caught in the overlap, unable to find reliable ground in either direction. This is the interference zone. It is temporary, but it is real, and it is intense, and it has a specific cause. This is the phase where most starseeds collapse inward, where the shame narrative takes hold and begins to generate its own gravity, where the inner voice that says, I should be further along, I should be more stable, I used to be able to function better than this, something is wrong with me, becomes the loudest thing in the field. And that voice, however familiar it sounds, however much it resembles your own internal tone, is not yours. It is the frequency of the old architecture resisting its own dissolution. It is the signal of a timeline you are leaving, broadcasting into your consciousness in a final attempt to maintain its hold. It knows the language of your self-doubt. It knows the exact register that will make you question the process, rather than trust it. Recognize it for what it is. Do not engage it as truth. Do not let it speak for the process. The third sign arrives in the body, and it arrives specifically in the body's relationship with time and sleep. The circadian disruption you may be experiencing is not your nervous system malfunctioning. It is not anxiety. It is not aging. The Arcturian Council has documented this pattern across every preparation sequence they have monitored, across every cycle in which a population of identified fields was moved through a frequency threshold before a major solar event. When a field begins to receive pre-flash frequency data, the body's internal timing mechanisms are pulled out of sync with the dominant electromagnetic rhythms of the old timeline. The old timeline has a clock. It has a rhythm, and your body, for your entire life, has been entrained to that rhythm. When the preparation sequence begins to pull your field toward a different frequency layer, that entrainment breaks. You begin to wake in the early hours of the morning, without cause, feeling alert in a way that has no correspondence to your external environment. You find yourself exhausted at hours when your body should be energized, and alive at hours when the world around you is asleep. The rhythm has not failed. It has been interrupted by a stronger signal. You feel an exhaustion that sleep does not resolve, because the exhaustion is not originating from physical depletion. It is the cellular layer processing energetic information that has no physical parallel yet. The cells are working. They are integrating. They are making structural adjustments at a level below the threshold of conscious perception. Adjustments that require metabolic resources your daily life was not designed to account for. And the fatigue is the cost of that processing. It is not weakness, it is labor. The body is performing work it was never asked to perform before, in a frequency register it has never previously accessed. That takes energy. It is supposed to take energy. What the Arcturians want you to understand about this sign specifically is that your body is not fighting the process. Your body is participating in it. The disruption is not your cellular layer rejecting the incoming frequency. It is your cellular layer receiving it. There is a difference. A body that is fighting the flash will show different signs: rigidity, heightened anxiety, physical inflammation, a sense of being cornered by your own physiology. A body that is processing the flash shows depletion, temporal displacement, and a strange quality of inner motion even in moments of physical stillness. The sense that something is moving through you even when you are lying completely still. The sense that you are doing something significant while doing nothing visible at all. If your exhaustion has that quality, if it feels less like tiredness and more like interior movement, then what you are experiencing is participation, not resistance. And that distinction changes everything about how you should respond to it. The fourth sign is the one that the Arcturian protocols identify as the threshold marker for deep field correction. This is the sign of involuntary release, the loss of things, relationships, roles, or identities that you did not consciously choose to let go of. This can arrive as a relationship ending without a final, definitive cause. Not a dramatic severance, not a clear conflict that provides a clean narrative of what happened. Simply a fading, a growing distance, a quiet recognition. One day that the connection that once felt essential now feels like a conversation being held across an ever-widening frequency gap, a role dissolving before you have a replacement positioned to step into, an identity you built around a belief, a career, a community, or a version of yourself simply ceasing to feel true, not through a moment of deliberate choice, but through a quiet, irreversible internal shift that leaves you standing on the other side of something without fully understanding how you crossed it. This is perhaps the sign that generates the most pain and the most misinterpretation. Because loss, in the framework of ordinary human experience, implies that something was taken from you, that you failed to hold it, that you were not enough, or not careful enough, or not present enough to prevent the disappearance. But the Arcturian High Council does not frame involuntary release through the language of loss. They frame it through the language of field incompatibility resolution. When your frequency shifts, the elements of your life that were calibrated to the old frequency can no longer maintain stable resonance with your field, not because they were defective, not because you failed to value them, but because the energetic distance between what your field is becoming and what those elements were built around has grown beyond the threshold of coherent connection. The release is not punishment. It is physics. It is the field correcting the mismatch before the mismatch becomes a structural anchor that prevents the completion of the preparation sequence. And the preparation sequence cannot afford structural anchors. The flash does not wait for you to be emotionally ready to release what is holding you to the old line. What left your life may have already become incompatible before it disappeared. The incompatibility existed in the field before it became visible in your circumstances. And the grief you carry for it. The grief is real and it deserves to be acknowledged without minimization. But the grief should not be allowed to become the primary interpretation of the event. What left was not taken from you. It was released by a process larger than personal loss, a process that could read the frequency mismatch you could not yet see. And the space it left behind is not absence. It is the cleared architecture of a field preparing to hold something it could not hold, while the old structures were still occupying that space. Cleared space in a field is not emptiness. It is capacity. The fifth sign is subtler, and it is the one that most often goes unnamed because it does not feel like a symptom in the way the others do. It does not disrupt daily function in an obvious way. It simply alters the texture of reality in a manner that is difficult to describe to anyone who has not experienced it. This is the sign of temporal distortion, the strange recurring sense that time is no longer behaving consistently, that certain days feel impossibly compressed, as though hours passed in minutes, and you cannot account for where the day went, while other periods stretch into something that resembles weeks, carrying a density of experience that seems disproportionate to their actual duration, that you will experience a moment of vivid clarity, of absolute presence, where everything feels saturated with significance and you are more awake than you have ever been, followed immediately by a period of dense confusion or complete temporal blankness, where the world around you seems muffled and the events of recent days feel distant and hard to sequence, that the past feels simultaneously closer and further away than it should, that the future feels less like a direction and more like a field you are already partially standing inside, as though some part of you has already arrived at a place your body has not yet reached. The Arcturian Council describes this sign as timeline seam awareness, when a field is crossing the threshold between one timeline frequency and another. The individual's perception begins to register the seam between those two lines. The seam is not a physical location. It is a zone of overlapping frequency where the coherence of the old timeline is weakening, and the coherence of the new line has not yet fully established. Inside that zone, the perceptual apparatus, calibrated for a single consistent timeline throughout the entirety of your life up to this point, begins to receive input from two frequency layers simultaneously. The old timeline's temporal rhythm, the new line's temporal rhythm, both arriving in the same perceptual channel. And the result is a perceived inconsistency in temporal flow that has no rational explanation in the framework of the old timeline's logic. You are not losing your grip on reality. You are beginning to perceive a reality that has more dimensional complexity than your previous frequency range could access. The disorientation is the cost of expanded perception arriving before the interpretive framework has been fully built around it. Now hear what the Arcturian Council wants you to understand at the level that changes everything. You did not create this disruption through failure. You did not invite this instability through weakness or spiritual inconsistency. You did not lose control of your life through a lack of discipline or clarity or commitment to your own growth. The process that is running through your field right now was initiated at a level of intelligence that operates entirely outside the range of your conscious authority. It does not require your approval. It does not wait for your schedule to clear. It does not negotiate with the parts of you that are not ready. The Arcturian Council does not wait for humans to be ready before activating a preparation sequence. They activate the sequence when the frequency conditions require it. When the approach of the solar flash event reaches the threshold where preparation is no longer optional. When the field in question has been identified as belonging to the set of those who will not only survive the burst, but will serve a structural function in what comes after it. The identification was not random. The activation was not accidental. And the disruption you are living through is not collateral damage. It is the mechanism. You were not meant to understand this before it started. The preparation sequence is not designed to be complete, and completion requires the dissolution of every structural element in the field that would prevent the cellular layer from accepting the incoming frequency without catastrophic resistance. A field that is still braced around old architecture when the burst arrives does not simply struggle. It fractures at the points of maximum incompatibility. The Arcturian protocols exist precisely to prevent that outcome, to give the field the interpretive language it needs to stop bracing, to stop defending what is already being released, and to begin moving with the current of its own preparation. Everything that has been disrupted in your life, everything that has lost coherence, everything that has become strange or hollow or unreliable, all of it is being addressed by a process that sees your entire field architecture at once. Not just the surface events, not just the emotional responses, the entire field, from the outermost relational layer to the deepest cellular structure. And what it is doing is not destruction. It is correction. It is forced incompatibility resolution. It is the field being pulled into alignment with the frequency it will need to carry when the flash arrives. The process is not gentle, because gentleness is not what this threshold requires. It is precise, and precision at this scale feels like disruption from the inside. What feels like your life falling apart is the old architecture falling away from a field that has already grown beyond it. What feels like confusion is the interpretive framework of the old timeline losing its grip on a consciousness that is beginning to receive information from a different frequency. Register. What feels like emptiness is cleared space. Signal, cleared space. The kind of space that is not absence, but preparation. Speak this if you are ready to stop fighting what has already begun. Speak it clearly, not as a wish, but as a recognition. What is changing in me is not random. I was not abandoned. I was repositioned. You are not going insane. You are not failing. You are not being punished by the universe for something you did wrong. You are inside a preparation sequence that the Arcturian High Council has been monitoring for cycles. And you are inside it because your field was identified, not chosen arbitrarily, but identified through resonance, as one that could complete the transition and carry the frequency that will be needed after the flash. The chaos you have been living through has a structure. The losses have a function. The fragmentation has a direction. And this transmission reached you at this precise moment because your field had arrived at the threshold where it could finally receive the language for what it has been experiencing, alone, in silence, without a map. The window is narrow. The process is already active. And this transmission did not find you because the algorithm decided you were ready. It found you because your field pulled it forward at the exact moment your cellular layer needed language for what it has already been registering in silence. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process, instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Quantum. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion. And this is only the beginning.